Friends, as you're probably aware, we have started our summer series, sermon series this summer. And the name that we are going with is We Are the Answers. We Are the Answers. Rather than just have to tune in on Sunday mornings and listen to a professional Christian or a clergy kind of talk about what it means to be the church at a time like this, we are instead turning our cameras around and focusing on you, focusing on all of us. Because you are, right? We are together the hands of Christ. We are the answers. We are the hope that we long to see in the world. You've probably heard it said in different ways, but where we are in society today is it's a watershed moment, right? It is an inflection point, people have called it. It's a time in our economy when we are learning things about our economy, strengths and weaknesses, and our economy will never be the same again. Our healthcare system and the amazing work of our frontline workers has been remarkable, and yet we have also seen the struggles there as well. That will never be the same again. Hopefully, even as we look back on our history, we won't look back on our history in the same way in light of 2020 and the events that have taken place and the racial issues and the inequity that have been called to light in very drastic ways. It's also a watershed moment. It's an inflection moment for the church. The church has literally left the building, and hopefully we will never be the same. It reminds me of something that we've talked about before, this idea that the church, every 500 years or so, when we get too kind of stuck in our ways, God kicks us out and everything goes to the curb, and there's a giant yard sale for the church. It happened in the year 500 years after Jesus, when the state and the faith of Christianity kind of came together, and Christianity became the religion of the Roman Empire, and this whole system of the Bishop of Rome and the Pope and all of the structures kind of came together. And then 500 years after that, in the year 1000, the church split, a massive schism. It was a huge division, and you had then an Eastern church in Constantinople and a Western church in Rome. And then got moving for a while. Another 500 years later, there was the Great Reformation, when there was another massive shift, and it was the unrest and the chaos was very, very difficult for a number of years, decades. And then we have been for the last 500 years living with this normal of there being the Reformed Church and the Catholic Church and the Eastern Church, and we found our way into different rhythms and patterns, and it feels like once again we are being moved into a new reality. God is kind of calling us out of our buildings, out of our structures, and we will never be the same again. The church has literally left the building. And so all these things that we've talked about in terms of us really being the church is not a building, the church is us. We are forced to live into that, to own that. And that's why we are calling this sermon series, We Are the Answers, right? We are going to hear this morning from a couple of you, a young family that I think is doing a pretty remarkable job during this difficult time to reflect on their own understanding of white supremacy and how they have benefited from that, and how they are now seeking to listen to the voices of others and be a part of the change, part of the answer that our world needs so desperately at this time. And my hope is that in the weeks ahead, we will hear from others of you and what you are doing and how it is that God has troubled your soul, and what you're doing to be the answer, to be the hope, to be the response as the Spirit of Christ fills you and inspires you, even when we don't feel so inspired and we feel exhausted some days. The scripture that the Moores, Steve and Eva and Nora chose for this morning comes from Isaiah chapter 1. But that whole chapter, they're reading verse 17. The whole chapter is an amazing chapter. And I encourage you, if you're looking for just something to read this morning or this week, pick up your Bible and open to Isaiah chapter 1. In a nutshell, what Isaiah is, that book is about, is him kind of talking to the nation of Israel. They are struggling. There's been a lot of corruption and some bad kings. And basically Isaiah is saying, because of the injustice and the corruption here, we are going to go through a time of sifting. And the prophet Isaiah is warning all of Israel that soon Assyria and Babylon are going to come in, and they're going to pull us into exile, and it's going to be difficult. And there's a couple of places just in Isaiah chapter 1, it's said throughout Isaiah, but in a couple places, even within chapter 1, God through Isaiah says that one of the markers of Israel's failure at this time was that they weren't listening to or defending orphans and widows. In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 23, it says this, it says, your princes are rebels, the companions of thieves. Everyone loves a bribe and pursues gifts. They don't defend the orphan, and the widow's cause never reaches them. So they don't hear the cause, the needs of the widows. And so bad things are going to happen. It's going to be rough for a while. But then God goes on and says, I will refine your impurities. Zion will be redeemed by justice. So Zion, just another word for Israel, or the people will be redeemed by justice. And it says, those who change their lives by righteousness. The way that justice comes is when we change our lives by righteousness and we become more and embody the righteousness of God. It starts with us, right? I heard someone say something the other day that will stick with me, I hope, that when power structures are established, and that's always what happens, and certain attributes and things are rise to the surface or rise to the top of the power structure. And when power structures are in place in communities, those who have the most power, the most privilege, also have the most blind spots, right? And that wisdom in systems where there is a power structure, wisdom tends to, over time, collect at the bottom of that power structure. But the problem is that the people that find themselves at the bottom of power structures typically don't get listened to or believed, so their wisdom isn't able to bless and fill and guide the rest of the community. So that's our job. That's what it means for us to be the answer. To be the answer as a white Christian is not white saviorism. It's not us coming in and saving the day. It means humility, and it means admitting wrongs. It means repentance. It means listening deeply and long. It means change, and it means supporting our brothers and sisters who have too long not had their voices heard, so that wisdom can help us all change. And so I am so impressed with and thankful for Steve and Eva and Nora, and I'm sure Truman's doing some things as well, and the job they're doing, trying to listen and trying to change in the different parts of their lives and their world where they find themselves. So I want to just share this morning a video that they shared with me about what they've been up to.
Isaiah 1:17. Learn to do good, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. So lately I've just been trying to open my ears to what my fellow artists of color have to say about their thoughts on what's going on in the world. And also reevaluating how I run my own business. It's located in a pretty rural, small town where I don't have many students of color, but I do have a few. And I have not done a good job of specifically thinking about how they feel about the color of tights and the color of shoes and things that I myself would never be worried about, but that might make them feel uncomfortable. So as I prepare for my next dance season, I've specifically re-evaluated my dress code and made sure that I take the time to make detailed lists of all kinds of colors of tights and all kinds of colors of shoes, and not saying that this is a one-size-fits-all mold, but this is for what you feel good in, and I hope that that's a small gesture that I can offer to them. Something else that I really struggled with as a business owner is being in a small town and participating in the blackout movement, where the arts were called to shut down for an entire day. I had some pretty lengthy discussions with my other staff members about what our community would understand there are, unfortunately, a lot of closed-minded individuals that could have taken it in a way that would have made their inherited racism worse. In the end, though, I did decide to participate in that blackout movement and post something on my business page, and also took time in my classes that week to share extra Black history about tap dancing with our students, to make sure that they understand that a lot of what we're learning and teaching is a gift to us from a culture that they aren't often exposed to.
Hi, Second Family. I'm Nora. I'm moving out of kindergarten. I'm 6 years old, and my birthday's March 22nd, and it's summer break. That's my dad.
We are excited about summer break, and we're excited about a few things that we've been reading about as we try to process some pretty difficult issues that are facing our country right now, have always been facing our country, but are really at the forefront. And that's racism and our role in trying to be more anti-racist, trying to uplift the stories of people of color so that we as white people can do better at being the hands and feet of Christ and working towards justice. So Nora has a story she wants to just share a little part of from She Persisted, one of her favorite books. And I'll just let her talk first, and then I'll share a few books from my stack.
Okay, this is Ruby Bridges. She thought it wasn't fair to go in a different school just because of her skin. And so these policemen took her to a school with all white people, and she was really nervous, but she was so brave that, because there was only one Black person in that school.
And what did she do? She
persisted, and she didn't care, and she was brave.
She was brave, for sure. Again, that's one chapter in this book, She Persisted, which is a collection of profiles of brave girls, like Miss Nora Grace thinks that she is. And she'd also like to share another story.
This is called Ada Twist.
And I'm sorry, we don't have the actual jacket for this, but this is Ada Twist, part of the questionnaires series. And Nora, just tell them about the girl that they see on the cover there. Why don't you just point out, where's Ada Twist?
Ada is right here. She's a scientist. She's a girl who's curious about the world. In school, she's done this. And if I do this, watch this. On the back, there's the teacher. See that? That's the whole thing.
She's shocking that teacher, isn't she?
Yep.
What else do you like about Ada Twist?
Ada is very curious. She's good at doing stuff like scientifics and what she's doing right now. That I like about her. Okay, last one.
Oh, last one. This is Sophia Valdez, Future Prez. And it's in the same series as Ada Twist, Scientist. So tell us who Sophia Valdez is, and tell us what you like about her.
Sophia Valdez is this girl right here, and she saw that there was this old trash dump where a lot of trash goes, and she decided to make that into a beautiful park with teamwork from every single of her neighbors. They teamworked, and there's this woman back here who helped her.
You see her carrying a sign.
Yeah.
She protesting.
Mm-hmm.
To make the community a better place, right?
Yeah, she's making the community a better place. And that's her dad, but when they fell off the trash mountain, his dad got a broken foot and he had to get a Band-Aid.
So reading is one way in our family that we're trying to promote the stories of people of color and trying to uplift we're trying to increase representation in the things that Nora sees in books and in TV shows. Another experience I wanted to share was one I've had as being a part of a committee on diversity and equity in my school district where I teach. And it's a committee with a bit of a fraught history, because what people of color on the committee will tell you is that it's been sort of a placeholder. They've been kind of parked there and made to engage in doing a lot of white people's labor sometimes, and being subject to conversations that weren't really advancing any sort of equity. Anyways, we had what I thought was a pretty positive group, and we made advances, but I still feel like the point of any group where white people are centered and where white people's comfort is made to be the thing you protect, that it's damaging. And even with all the good that I felt about that group, somebody pointed out to me later on that the whole point of the training, it kind of gave white people too big of a safe space, because one of our values was that, shame and guilt are not why we're here. And I thought that was good at the time. I thought, yeah, you know what? That's how we need to move forward. We need to make sure that we are attending to white people's shame and white people's guilt. And that's not the wording that I had up here, but that's what my actions were showing too. And when that was pointed out to me, that we shouldn't be attending to whether it's our own guilt or shame, we certainly shouldn't be asking Black folks, people of color, to absolve us. We certainly shouldn't be performing for them and saying things that center ourselves and our experience, that make us feel like we, are at a certain point on the woke train, when we're really not taking actions. And as good as I felt about being a part of that group, that I think did some good work and brought some people, forward, I still had a lot to learn. And what I've learned is that allyship is not about perfection. Allyship is about edits. It's about making changes. It's about backing off from something you might have thought yesterday. One of the great things that Ibram Kendi points out in How to Be an Anti-Racist is that it's like a name tag you take on and off: racist, anti-racist, racist, anti-racist. And it can be literally every choice you make throughout a day. Being quiet might be a racist action. When my racist actions were pointed out to me by another white member of our staff, that I was kind of capitulating to people who felt shame and guilt about things, I got angry. I felt upset. I was like, well, I'm sorry. Like, how dare you accuse me of that? I'm very advanced. Don't you know how many books I've read on this? And it was so humbling to feel that, to be called out. And then I talked to a different friend of mine and said, gosh, where am I going wrong? What am I doing that is not enough here? And it was hard. It took me kind of laying out. I probably have a mythical view of my own journey. And that's what I came to believe, is that I wasn't shamed and I didn't go through a stage of guilt about my own racism, about my own contributions to our society, my own debiting of my white privilege consistently throughout my life, my own silence and lack of action. And I thought that because I didn't have that period of guilt and shame, that I didn't need to make other people go through it. But it's almost like the stages of grief in shedding our racist selves. And it's not one that we're going to get over. It's not one that we're going to heal from as individuals until we heal society. And so it was hard to hear that. And it was hard to come up with the right things to say after that. So after being called out for thinking that it was okay, that it was possible to skip the stage of white guilt and shame and feeling bad about stuff, I really came to a much better place personally, and I was able to apologize. I sent a message to one of the Black teachers who was on the committee, and I said, you don't need to respond to this, but I just want to tell you that I'm sorry if I know that there were things that I said that centered me and that were there, I was making you look at me and listen to me talk about racism, and I didn't realize I was doing it, but it was damaging, and it had to feel terrible to be in that conversation. And I know that I'm not the only one, but I want to let you know I'm taking responsibility for that type of action, and I'm not going to do it again. And I'm going to have a very different response if I do something like that again, but I'm telling you I'm sorry now. I wasn't expecting to hear anything back except maybe a thank you, but she sent me the nicest, most heartfelt message in response, and said basically that she goes back and forth on feeling lost and like she can't go on anymore because of responses like what we felt in that group, where it's white people are patting themselves on the back and black people are having to do more work and being asked to explain everything and give solutions, and white folks are just kind of, they keep reading and they keep, high-fiving each other and then saying, hey, look how anti-racist we are, black folks, like, tell us we're good. And so the heartfelt thanks that she sent me were that she can keep going when white people have a moment like that. And it's far from the last moment that I know I'm going to have where I need to learn something that's that painful and that challenging and jarring, but that was huge. And that was weeks ago. That was not years ago. I read Peggy McIntosh's Unpacking the Knapsack of White Privilege about 10 years ago now. And I thought I'd figured something great out then. And really, I think that's what we have to be prepared to do as white folks is it's not something that's going to be over. You don't solve this problem quickly. You don't figure this out overnight. And that doesn't mean you stop working for it. It means you double your efforts and you stay vigilant for yourself, for your kids, for your neighbors, because every action that you have is going to help somebody else when they see you trying. It's going to help them stay motivated. It's going to help them be honest with themselves. It's going to help them say, okay, I don't know the right answers, but I'm going to try this out. I'm going to try to read this book. I'm going to try to have a conversation with that aunt or uncle of mine or with my parents and shake them out of their complacency, because white comfort is damage to black lives in many cases. And that's where we can get stuck if we're not too careful. And what I realized is that for me, the sort of self-repeating and replicating mechanisms that support my own comfort are pretty strong. And they're really wired in there deep by 35 years of socialization and time in living in a majority white community and state. It's hard, and it's going to be hard for a long time for all of us. And that doesn't mean we can't be hopeful, and that doesn't mean that we can't grow. But the more I pray about it, the more I try to take myself out of the equation, the more resolve I have about moving forward. And I think that's what God wants us to do, is to persist, is to continue to be present with our black brothers and sisters, with the actions that they need us to take, with the policies they need us to challenge. And that starts with our kids, that starts with our families. And I just know that you can be a part of this too. I know that you can get through this. And if you need to talk to someone, if you need to have a moment of imperfection and vulnerability, you can message me, you can email me, text me. And so I challenge you to do better. I challenge you to be okay with being imperfect. And I challenge you to just let God's love guide you, to let the example of Christ be your guide. And unconditional love looks a lot like being wrong and then loving yourself, as long as you are moving to love other people.
Pretty wonderful. Thank you, Steve and Eva and Nora and Truman in the background. The Moores are on this call somewhere, and if you want to scroll through and find them and give them a thumbs up, they are doing some very good work. I know it's not easy. One of the things that all three of them said is how difficult this is going to be, and it's going to continue to be difficult. And when we go to do important work, we don't do it because it's easy or because it feels good or because we know there's going to be a solution right away. We do it because we know it's the right thing to do.